welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. What a week it has been. Within the space of 4 days, the Eagles fan base has gone from utter panic and turmoil to the fact their team is 2-3, they can't close out games, there's injury across the board, they're clamouring for running backs of old, to, oh, well, they've just steamrolled the Giants and everything's suddenly okay again because they're the best team in the NFC East. Times change really quickly with this team. I'm sure that you all know that by now. Depending whether you follow this team for a year, whether you followed it for 10, it always seems to be the same patterns emerging over and over again. The minute one minor cog goes wrong, the whole world falls apart. And luckily for this Eagles team, I think their front office and coaching staff have done a great job in keeping it all banded together. We've seen in other regimes that isn't quite the case. You just look to, back to Chip Kelly, perhaps for the most recent example. But if you are new to this podcast, if you've not subscribed yet, if this is your first time listening, welcome to a very different and very British orientated experience. If you want to subscribe, there's a link down below that takes you straight to iTunes. That means you get every episode for free on your device the minute it drops. You have to put in no work whatsoever. It's the easiest way you can support what we do here at Philly Sports Network, and it really would mean the world to me. So if you've got a spare 30 seconds, hit subscribe, rate it 5 stars. Let me know you've done it on Twitter and I'll give you a little cyber cuddle, because that's what we're all about here. But I wanted to start with this. It's probably, I think, the biggest thing coming out of this game last night. Now, I unfortunately didn't make it through the game last night. I was sort of sleep deprived. My other job picked up an intensity and I'd had 7 hours sleep in 3 days. So with the game starting at 1 a.m, I fought bravely. There were 4 cups of coffee after 8 in the evening. And unfortunately, by 3 a.m, I'd passed out. So I had to rewatch it this morning. But immediate takeaways were, context is a wonderful, wonderful thing, right? And for those of you who aren't new to this podcast and who have been around for a little while, you'll remember that not too long ago, we had a special guest on this show. That man went by the name of Michael Lombardi. Now, don't freak out. Don't throw anything at me just yet. Hold on just a second. I got him on the show because obviously last year he made some very controversial comments surrounding Doug Peterson, and this year just wanted to see what his opinion was. He's a multiple Super Bowl winning head coach. He's a published author. He's currently now in the NFL media with his own GM Street podcast. He is a very, very intellectual mind, and having worked with Bill Belichick so closely, it would be silly not to pick his brains. And the one thing he said that you should all remember is that we will not find out the true identity of this team until mid-October. And how right could he have been? He may have been wrong about Doug Peterson, but that is the most accurate thing. And everyone was panicking. And I'm not pointing fingers as to who or why, but there are certain people on social media, or more importantly on sports radio, that will spew narrative-driven trash. I said the word trash. This is not going well. Oh, do you know what? I'm going to hit the London game in like 2 weeks, and I'm going, hey guys, welcome to London. And they're going to go, what? Like, I'm becoming that American, it's worrying. But back onto point, it feels like it's almost media scare tactics in a way. There's a lot of people out there that just want to get the narrative of the sky is falling down. And it really, really isn't. Bigger scheme of things, yes, this team is probably suffering from a Super Bowl hangover. And it isn't just a regular hangover. This is like the granddaddy of all hangovers. This is where you go out and you don't remember where you woke up. And you just sort of appear there and your head's spinning and you're not sure what happened the night before, but you have all these weird marks and tattoos and a tie around your head and a Ferrari outside that's not yours. One of those nights. I mean, I think one of my most notable ones happened not too long ago. I'll try not to get into that too much, but there is a reason I go by the nickname of Lambrini Liam around my few friends. But when we look at, as I say, bigger picture, granddaddy of hangovers is what this team had. You go into this season with no Carson Wentz until week 3 or 4. You're not sure when he's going to come back. Alshon Jeffrey is out for a few weeks. You're not sure when he's going to come back. Then you have more wide receiver injuries when you lose Mike Wallace. Your offensive line is still banged up from the Super Bowl. They're leaking pressure left, right and centre. Your defensive line have some flaws, some problems along there, but not overly massive. Your cornerbacks then struggle because defenses are now having to kind of look at what the Eagles are doing and try and change it up. Offenses are attacking this team so much underneath that the ball is out before it's even been snapped. I mean, at this point, the centre may as well pass the ball. And it would just be even more effective, I think, than what Eli Manning could do. But that meant that the pass rush had virtually no time to get to the quarterback, and although they are the best run defense in the league, their pass rush was just nearly non-existent at times because offenses could just get the ball out so easily. Then you've got injuries to the defensive backfield. Rodney McLeod goes down, Corey Graham goes down. Like, what can you do? What do you expect from this team? Carson Wentz, in my opinion, comes into this game slowly now starting to get in sync with the guys around him. Very slowly. Alshon Jeffrey is back. The man, until a couple of weeks ago, have not played a competitive snap of football since November, December last year, week 14 against the Rams. We are now nearly a year ahead of that, and Wentz have not played a regular season snap. He has now been battered and bruised more than most other quarterbacks in this league within the last few games. The wide receivers that he's working with, Alshon Jeffrey missed a lot of time during the preseason, and well, all of preseason, all of OTAs, all of training camp. So there was no real opportunity for those two to gel. Nelson Aguilar was obviously, going through his paces with a different quarterback in Nick Foles. It's an adjustment. Bearing in mind that all of those receivers, Zach Ertz included, had been used to the timing, the rhythm, everything else from Nick Foles from week 14 through to week 3. And you're telling me that Carson Wentz, a guy who is drastically different in the way he plays the game, is just going to fit in and be exactly the same as Nick Foles, throw the ball at the same velocity as Nick Foles, hit the same points that Nick Foles does, put the same touch on it, lead the receivers the same way, draw the linebackers and the safeties with his eyes the same way? Not at all. Not at all, especially one that's coming back off a torn ACL. There were going to be inevitable speed bumps, and the biggest difference that we've seen by Carson Wentz since returning to the field in week 3 is his accuracy. He's now completed close to 70% of his passes for over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 1 pick that really kind of was his own fault, but not really, and 104.7 passer rating. And you're telling me that's not impressive? You're telling me that last night, when he was 9 of 16 on 3rd down, Wentz passed 10 out of 10 times in those situations, made all 10 passes. He is so synced up with his wide receivers now because that chemistry is there. You can even see it with Jordan Matthews. Those guys hadn't thrown and received passes from one another for close to 2 years. And yeah, here they are. It is a tough thing for a quarterback to walk back into when a backup who, for pretty much half a season, you're looking at week 14 to 17 is 3 games, then another 3 games, that's 8, then you've got, 7, God, my maths is atrocious, then you've got the opening 2 weeks of the season, that's over half a year's worth of snaps, plus the off-season, plus the pre-season, with a stagnant pocket passer that floats balls up. You've now got Wentz, who likes to rip the jugular vein, as Brian Balding had put it, out of the opponent. It was going to take time. There are injuries across the board. There was never a need for panic station. And what the hell happened on social media where there were people clamouring for the benching of Carson Wentz and saying that Nick Foles was the better quarterback and Nick Foles should be on the field and this team wouldn't be 2-3 without him? In fact, I put an Eagles film room video up not too long ago about, Lane Johnson and his apparent regression. Is it his fault? Is it not? Spoiler alert, it really wasn't. And so one of the comments that I actually got, okay, let me just try and find this now on my my YouTube comment. They don't have a Super Bowl winning quarterback. That would be Nick Foles. I don't think moving forward is doing that team any good keeping Wentz when he had nothing to do with that victory. Yeah, he only got them there by having the most remarkable campaign in Eagles history I can personally remember. He only had an MVP level season, leading the league in touchdowns by the time. I'm not going through that debate again. But there is part of this fan base that relies so much on radio talk that it is deafening. Carson Wentz has come out, synced up with his wide receivers, and ruined a Giants secondary that, in actual fact, is pretty damn good. Janoris Jenkins is a great corner. Eli Apple, although very emotional, and a more annoying version of Jalen Mills, is quite a good cornerback. But the Eagles got it done. They found a way and they decimated through the air. As Michael Lombardi said, this team was always going to discover its identity in mid-October, because that's when things start syncing up. The other area of this team is that The most important relationship on any football franchise is between an offensive coordinator and his quarterback. I've been told that by several people. Former quarterback, I'm not going to actually say his name, kind of source, but a former Arizona Cardinals quarterback being one of them, that the relationship you have between a quarterback and your offensive coordinator, you have to be in sync. You've got to be on the same page. You've got to know the intricacies of each other on and off the field. If you're not married up with each other's ability to make decisive calls inside the game and outside, then it's going to be a struggle. To the point where I know that there are certain offensive coordinators and QB coaches who take quarterbacks out to dinner to decipher how quickly they order as a gauge on what their decision making is going to be like going through reads. That is a legitimate thing. People go really deep into this. It is a symbiotic relationship. You've got to bounce off each other. And Wentz comes into the regular season with Frank Reich no longer there, Mike Groh, who used to work with the wide receivers, and now having to adapt to two quarterbacks. Nick Foles one, Carson Wentz the other. The playbook with Nick Foles in the fray is very much a Chip Kelly design. You can see influences from that era, from Peterson's West Coast background. Pat Shurmur was telling me just last week, the Giants head coach, that nothing stands out. Shurmur's got a West Coast background. He coached the Eagles for 13 years. He understands everything that Peterson's doing because it is a culmination of everything he's experienced. When Wentz gets in the fray, things change up. The heat turns up a little bit. The intensity comes on. We saw it in the second half against the Vikings. And this team isn't built to be 17 points down. That's what Jim Schwartz said. The point of his defense is that they have to be attacking. You've got to attack. You've got to go deep. You've got to move fast. And the thing is, if you're ahead by 20 points, let's say, and all you can do is just check down, run, check down, run, you're going to abuse that all day long because the Eagles' corners are 10 yards off the ball. I could line up at a wide receiver against Jalen Mills, who's 10 yards away, and make a catch. It's not hard. You run 5 yards, you turn around, you catch a ball. Anyone in theory can do that task, okay? The difference is that when that team is in front by 17 points and you've got to air it out downfield, those off coverage looks become almost unsustainable for an offense to attack. Because now you've got a corner that may be a bit slower, but is accelerating with less ground to cover vertically. You've got safety help over the top, linebackers covering the middle to block tight ends, and an elite run defense. That is when the Jim Schwartz D is at its finest. That's what we saw last night. That's what we saw with a split safety shell. This team is beginning to function as it once did because the offense is moving. The defense cannot apply bend but don't break when you're trying to shatter the opposition. When you're down by 17 and an offense, all it needs to do is run the clock, and you're built so you can allow them to do that without giving up the big play. That is literally like taking, do you know what? I've got this bomb and I've got this match. I'm going to put them together but hope that bomb doesn't go off. Instead, Jim Schwartz shakes it up. He knows there's no tight ends. The Eagles get out to an early lead thanks to a turnover forced by Jordan Hicks. And then you can bring the corners closer to the line a little bit. You can shake things up. You can get more aggressive. He only blitzed once and he had 38 pressures on Eli Manning. That is what this team is made of. Stop hitting panic mode. Don't worry. Everything's alright. We move on to the next week with the Carolina Panthers. Again, if you're new to this podcast, don't forget, hit that subscribe button, guys. It would mean the absolute world to me if you could. I want to do a little giveaway next week as well. I'm not going to give too much out just yet, but we also have a very, very special guest coming on when the Eagles come to London, and I know you guys are going to absolutely love this. He's one of the most talked about names in Philadelphia sports right now, although not directly correlated with them, and I really cannot wait to sit down and talk shop with this man. So be sure to stick around for that. But moving on now, secondly, there are still problems with this team. And the only way I can liken it is to when you buy a car, okay? The year is 1998. You go out and you buy yourself a lovely Nissan Micra. I don't know if this is just a British car. Well, it's a Japanese manufacturer, but hell, Americans might have it. It's a bad car, alright? But back then, hey, it's great. And you nurse that car, and for the first 5-6 years, it plods along, does the job, everything works great. And then eventually, it starts failing the services. And you've got to start replacing the cam belt and the handbrake and the seat belts, and the radio doesn't work anymore because you all use iPods and iPhones. and then the cup holder breaks because the plastic's worn on it. And then you put your foot through the accelerator and the pedal falls off and you've got to replace that. Then you go to, move the chair back and the handle falls off. You don't have electronic windows, so you get over. Can you tell I'm talking from personal preference here? The point is, my mum will not give up that car. She loves it to death, and it will struggle to go up any minor sense of elevation. If there is a hill directly outside our house, the car has to be in first gear, and it sounds like it is literally going to die. Alright, the minute you're halfway up, it starts slowing down a bit. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. But she won't give it up until there is literally nothing left, and she has to. Which is fine, but you can't apply that principle to an offensive tackle. Jason Peters now has reportedly torn his bicep. Clearly was not at 100% for the start of the season, but the point is, even if he hasn't and he can play or that bicep is manageable, this is a man that, let's be honest now, is at the tail end of his career. It is a heartwarming story that Jason Peters has come back. He's one of the biggest underdog success stories in NFL history. He is a guaranteed Hall of Famer. You look at what he does, the way he plays the game, the leadership that he brings to the table, but he's 36 years old. He was an undrafted free agent in 2004. He's been with the Eagles since 2009. And of course, since, joining the Eagles, he's made, I dread to think how many Pro Bowls. I think it's 6 or 7. The reputation is, he is an elite, a legendary, a Hall of Fame offensive tackle. The reality is, he's given up the third most holding calls of any tackle in the NFL, and his offensive line is leaking. In week 3, 5 sacks, 8 hits. Week 4, 4 sacks, 11 hits. Week 5, 3 sacks and 8 sacks. In week 6, a sack and 5 hits, but the Giants were without their first 2 elite pass rushes. They've got the least sacks of anyone in the NFL, and somehow Peters still gives up pressure. There is a significant problem there. Lane Johnson, I've done the film room on him. I really don't think he's at fault that much. There's just some schematic things and getting out of his own way, but he was much better in week 6. You can easily say that. But Jason Peters, this isn't about, discarding a reputation and thinking, just because he's a Hall of Fame caliber player doesn't mean he's playing like a Hall of Famer now. That's the big thing. Eli Manning, in my opinion, should be a borderline Hall of Famer. He's not guaranteed to get in, but Eli Manning is at the same point. He's got to the end of a career where instead of going out a hero, he's living long enough to see himself become the villain. We've seen that time and time again. It's the same thing with Peyton Manning, Eli's brother. You look at Peyton Manning in his last season in Denver, right? And all anyone remembers is, wow, do you know what? He's an iconic player. He played 18 years in this league. He was a first overall pick by the Colts. He is a multiple Super Bowl winner. He gets his team to the Super Bowl and he beats Cam Newton and the Panthers in a remarkable game. And he's a legend and he retires and it's glorified. And he's an absolute hero and everyone should look up to him and his Papa John's forehead. The reality is, in that final season, he averaged 6.8 yards per attempt. He threw 9 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, and was benched for Trevor Siemian. No, it wasn't. It was Brock Osweiler. Wow, that was a throwback. And then, obviously, in the Super Bowl, Peyton Manning comes back and does Peyton Manning things, and it's all great. And he still only completes 56% of his passes and doesn't throw a touchdown and still turns the ball over, has a quarterback rating of 5. But he won the Super Bowl. He's an icon. He's heroic. It's fantastic. That's all you need to know. Jason Peters, we're not asking you to hang up the boots. I think anyone is asking you. We know you've had a remarkable career, a fantastic career, a legend in everyone's eyes. You could not ask for a better role model for anyone in life, let alone football. But there's got to come a time now where someone like Jeff Stoutland, maybe someone like Eugene Chung, someone on that offensive line coaching staff, someone, even Doug Peterson, has got to have a look at it and go, do you know what? We're conceding too much here. I think we've got to give someone else a shot. And again, I don't think this should be benching, but Peters comes out of games early. He comes out injured. He doesn't go through off-season anymore, doesn't do training camp. The tread is so paper thin. You know what you're risking every time. It is like, that game where it was a craze on Facebook for about a week, where you get a knife and you put your hand out and you've got to kind of get the gaps between your fingers with the knife and go, sailor, or whatever it is, right? And it was like idiotic. You know there is a risk eventually you're gonna stab your finger and it's really gonna hurt. But you're gonna keep doing it because how you're getting those Facebook likes, and your mum's friend shared it to her friend Janice along with her e-cards saying, but some people think I'm really funny but I'm actually really mean. That is what we're looking at here, for lack of a better example. And I don't know, if I'm the Eagles right now, I would play the card of trying to nurse that injury. I also don't agree with whatever... I'm not going to name him again, but I went at him on Twitter for this. Someone suggested, who runs a very successful podcast of his own, no problem with him, got a fair amount of respect to him until he screwed over someone else, but we won't talk about that. That somehow Jason Peters orchestrated the Wisniewski benching. And then it was his idea because he was bitter that Wisniewski fell on his leg last season. Like, get in the bin, right? That's obviously, it's just not true, is it? Like, no offensive lineman's going to go to Doug Peterson and go, hey, Doug, do you know Stefan? Yeah, he just smells, he just lets up too much pressure. I know I'm giving up more pressures than anyone else. I know Lane is as well, but hey, let's bench Wiz because why not, right? Let's give Isaac a go. I've worked with Isaac for 2 years now. I know he's been awful. I know he can't play centre either, but let's give him a shot at left guard, Doug, eh? For old time's sake, for all those years that I've been in the league, no one has got that kind of leverage. And if they had, there is a severe problem in that locker room. And there is going to be massive repercussions and massive fractures. And it is Chip Kelly take 2. Players should not have that much control. This is not the NBA or LeBron James. And I got called idiotic by him for disagreeing with that. Oh, it blows my mind. I don't know how some radio shows, some podcasts, some whatever it is, will bait everything just for views, just to get... it doesn't even make sense, the opinion, half the time, but gee, I need a break already. I feel... it drains you. It really does, having to go back to these guys, but, we move on. Anyway, I think the point is, there's got to be something, or a conversation surrounding Jason Peters, because the offensive line, as we've learned, it's not something you can plug and play. You can't just move guys around willy-nilly without there being some sort of repercussion. And I do genuinely feel like that Jason Peters, the longer he's staying in there, is kind of hurting this situation. And we know, again, the reputation he has and his legendary status, but he's not playing like a legendary player. He's playing like a marginal starter for the snaps he is actually in the game and not on the sideline. And I feel like if you're the Eagles coaching staff, you've got to come to a decision. So I'd love to hear your take on this, because it is controversial, and it's something where Jason Peters is one of those names where he feels so protected because of the legacy he has that you can't say anything marginally negative about him without there being a fireback of just sheer animosity from fans. But it's a discussion that needs to happen. And I'm really interested to see what your guys' views are. So, again, third plug of the day, if you're new around here, hit subscribe. If you're on YouTube, do that as well. We want to get to 5k subs by the end of the year. But I know on our podcast, we want to drive up the listens. We want to beat out those bigger podcasts. So you don't have to listen to that drivel, to those absurd opinions or hot takes. It's got to a point where people are on Twitter going, oh, I've got a hot take coming, get ready. Dude, what? Why would you need to hype up a thought? That's all it is. It's a thought, an opinion. You're hyping up an opinion without context. Alright? Let's end that. Let's get podcasts where they deserve that recognition. Guys like my man Tyler Zuli over at The Fanatic is killing it right now. Guys, go and listen to that show. And Pat Egan. Like, those are the guys you want to listen to. But yeah, Jack Fitz, another brilliant guy over at 94. Be sure to go and check out his stuff. But let's just get some hype. If you're liking this content, the only way we're ever going to improve is with your support. So please hit that subscribe button. It's free. It takes 2 seconds. No sign-ups or anything needed. And it just means you can be part of this movement and we can get bigger and better shows for you all. Talking of bigger and better, I think we've avoided this one long enough now. Where do we start with the running backs? So this week, I was very tempted to do a podcast. Unfortunately, I couldn't because my second job dictated otherwise. But obviously, during the opening stages of the week, the Eagles tweeted out that Jay Ajayi will miss the season with a torn ACL. frenzy, and oh, it took 38 seconds for my mentions to be flooded with Le'Veon Bell tweets. And it was the podcast before, literally a week ago, I delivered a 20-minute rant on why the signing of Le'Veon Bell makes no sense whatsoever. And I knew the minute Jay Ajayi goes down, it's all going to kick back up. It's all about Le'Veon Bell. And it hit like an absolute hurricane. I have not seen it. And then everyone scrambles round and it's like, well, who can they sign? So the name LeSean McCoy gets thrown into the mix. And this brings up an entirely different discussion because, yes, LeSean McCoy knows the system, he knows the team, and Chip Kelly was a very bad man in trading him away. For sure. Absolutely. You know, he's a 30-year-old back, he's got plenty left in him, he's coming off of 2 1,000-yard seasons, he's battled injury, and the Eagles would have him through 2019. Yes, it makes sense to a degree. And this is where you're wrong. I don't think anyone's doubting that LeSean McCoy has unfinished business in Philadelphia, but the other side of it is very simple. He has a long list of off-the-field drama. Let's go back to 2013, and everyone associates LeSean McCoy's final tenure in Philadelphia with it just being Chip Kelly trying to get value for a player because he was black or something ridiculous, like he was racist, or that's why he kept Riley Cooper and all this other stuff. But let's not forget, in 2013, LeSean McCoy had a lawsuit filed against him and claimed that I think it was him and his bodyguard assaulted her and kicked her off a party bus. Brilliant. Then in 2014, he fights with his baby mama on Twitter, and then there was an article kind of going through the entire dialogue and that sort of thing. Then there was the lousy tip. We all remember that, right? LeSean McCoy was in a restaurant in Philadelphia, and he left a 20-cent tip on like a $60 bill or something like that. That was fun, okay? Then there was LeSean McCoy versus Chip Kelly. Those guys just could never get along. McCoy apparently said that LeSean McCoy was getting over... No, sorry, Kelly said... No. Oh, I can't even talk today. My head's gone. I'm on a complete lack of sleep. LeSean McCoy said Kelly, there we go, was getting rid of every Eagles player who was black and it was any worth, and that wasn't the case. And you never really found an end result here other than... Chip Kelly knew what LeSean McCoy was doing on the field. You could see the value he had in his offense. You wouldn't trade that for no reason. Now, unfortunately, the returns of that trade obviously turned out to be Kiko Alonso. But, it was just a strange situation. But then, it doesn't end there, ladies and gentlemen, because he left Philadelphia, goes to a females-only party. Prior to, you think with a new team, it's new surroundings, there's a lot to do. But, just remember, Jordan Matthews said that they're going to have a buffalo baby because there's nothing out there to do other than have sex. And that's what LeSean McCoy tried to do. He received plenty of unwanted attention because he held a party that was just for females, and apparently there was some weird orgy kind of vibe. Then there was the alleged police assault to an off-duty officer. And then, of course, there was what we saw this off-season with the alleged domestic abuse allegations. Now, going through all that kind of makes me think, you know what? I don't think it was anything to do with his race. I think Chip Kelly knew that guy inside the locker room just wasn't a great guy. Culturally, for the city, for the fans, for what he did on the field, absolutely remarkable. Off the field, the guy is a total liability, cannot keep himself out of trouble. He's 30 years old now. You'd think he would have learned a thing or two. Apparently not. He's currently in Buffalo battling for snaps with a couple of guys who I don't think he really should be battling with. But the point is, Buffalo don't exactly seem too fussed without him. I mean, they've got insurance policies there. And it does bring up an interesting debate as to what it would take to lure LeSean McCoy to Philadelphia. And some people are out there thinking that, do you know what, we can trade Wisniewski and that's why he's being benched because the Bills are down to their final left guard. And I said that package and maybe a 6th round pick makes perfect sense because the Bills at running back do have talent there. They're not completely devoid. They have got Chris Ivory. They do have Marcus Murphy, who has proven to be no slouch during that time. So there is potential. But the thing is, I've noticed this before since when Doug Peterson first arrived, that it's very easy to live in the past with this team because there was a glorified era before Andy Reid left. But can we not forget for a minute, that the year before Chip Kelly arrived, Andy Reid took that roster of LaShawn McCoy, the heroic Deshaun Jackson, and everyone else on that team to 4-12. And Chip Kelly turned it right around. And yes, it all went kind of downhill massively after that. The point was those players sucked for a year. Downright, the honest opinion, they sucked for a whole year. Probably a bit before that as well. The wheels started to come off the wagon. The thing about the glory days is they're great when you're in them. Okay? And everyone's looking back at this team now thinking, do you know what? We can bring back this guy and we can do this and it's brilliant. The glory days for this football team, wake up call, are happening right in front of you. They have just won a Super Bowl championship. The first in NFL history for that team. The first in 52 years. You do not need to go back shopping for 30-year-old guys who are struggling to do what they had before because, they didn't get to finish it. They didn't get a ring and I like him and he signed my kid's autograph once. Forget that. This team is moving in a new direction with a new head coach that invests less of LaShawn McCoy's actual salary across 4 players at the same position. There is a reason they've not drafted a running back in the first round. There is a reason they've not signed a big free agent. There is a damn good reason they won't do the same now. And that stupid David Johnson rumour, which is completely false, take that with a grain of salt. Doug Peterson's committee is different. We saw it in Kansas City during his season there as offensive coordinator, where he took the reins of the offense in the second half of games during the second half of the season. He loved to use Spencer Ware. He loved to use Charles Sandrick West. And when Jamal Charles came back, that was a 3-headed monster that would hold up today. They are not going to go out of their way and sign a back they can avoid or someone that is going to impact a locker room where the culture is so different now. This isn't a locker room where they'll go to a strip club the day before training camp and get themselves into trouble, Nelson Aguilar. This is not an environment now where people will go and get them involved in umbrella-related altercations, Nigel Braden. This is a very different team with a very different vibe, with a very different leader who kind of doesn't take a lot to get rattled and make a snap decision. You can't get away with murder like you used to. LaShawn McCoy is one of those guys that loves the hype around him, that loves everything else. Phenomenal on the field. As much as I think it is a win-win situation for both teams, culturally, not a fan. But let me know what you think. I just think the glory days are great when you're in them and you think they're brilliant, but you look back and you know what? You can start picking it apart. It's sort of like coming out of a relationship, only instead of going, do you know what? That was actually really good. That was brilliant. You're looking for the bad things. The opposite of this, instead of looking back on a previous relationship going, oh, do you know what? She was actually a bit of a dick. She was horrible. There were things that went wrong. Maybe there were both parts, but it just wasn't as good as I thought. You look at other running backs that may be the opposite. Someone like Kenyon Barner, who every time he's been on the team has actually produced, and you've never really appreciated him. Right? The former Oregon Duck has been on and off this team for so long. He was brought on during the heart of last season. He's now going through the same back and forth with the New England Patriots. He can't seem to hold down a position. And it sucks because, you know what? He's not going to be the biggest guy in a locker room. He's not going to be a guy that will elementally change a backfield. But you look at his stats, he's had 4 years in Philadelphia. You know, and during that time, he had 2 100-plus yard seasons. He's been okay through the air. And on special teams in the return game, he's actually been very valuable. And he came in at a moment's notice last year, started a game, averaged maybe 3.6 yards per carry, I think, off the top of my head. If I can remember that, I'm really impressed with myself. He put up the yards through the air, and he came in a clutch situation. That is the type of person you've had a relationship with where you look back, and then you're single, and you're alone, and you're thinking, do you know what? They looked after me. I never appreciated them enough. Actually, they were good. You know, there were never any hassles with them. He was a great guy. He was, sure, he probably wasn't the Garrett Blunt or Jay Ajayi or Le'Veon Bell. He wasn't a supermodel in this case. He wasn't a super rich guy. But you know what? His heart was in the right place. You knew what you were getting. There was never going to be bad signs. And instead, you want to risk that for a supermodel that could have a cocaine addiction and could mess up your life. If you want to go down that way, Eagles, you be my guest. You know what you're getting with LaShawn McCoy. You've had him in your building for so long. X's are X's for a reason, as they say. I don't know about running backs are running backs for a reason. Maybe that doesn't apply. But hey, who knows? If you're not an X, then maybe you are next. I don't know where this conversation is going right now. Maybe we're looking at someone like a TJ Yeldon, who has been good with the Jags. There are really good running backs around. I really like, there's a former New York Giants running back who, if I'm brutally honest, again, Orleans Darkwa not getting the love he deserves. That's a guy I think New York should be looking back on, because if Saquon goes down, they would be doomed. He is literally the lone source of production there. But it's one of those areas where you can find good running backs for cheap. Spencer Ware, Charles Andrick West, both of them would be fantastic additions to this unit. So who knows what Dougie P's going to do? Who knows what Howie Roseman's going to try and swing? Maybe it's someone like Terrence West. Maybe it's someone a little bit down the further of the depth chart order. Who knows? But they are not going to go out of their way and risk, bearing in mind their cap space is so backloaded. They have done so much to move Lane's money, Ertz's money. They did it with Selleck before he retired. They've done it with Jenkins. They've done it with Kelsey. They've done it with Brooks. Literally anyone on that team has had their salary removed around and backloaded so that they can kind of deviate the problem. It's sort of like if you know you've got a leak in the toilet, you just close the door and lock it for a bit so it doesn't smell. You've got to deal with it at some point, but you can get away with it for a day or a few hours. That's exactly what's happening. So don't think for a second they're going to take a 7-week rental on Le'Veon Bell for $9 million, and I doubt they're going to take $4 million for LaShawn McCoy. It would not surprise me if they tried to incentivize a deal, someone maybe $2 million a year, and for that price, that will be someone like a Derrick Henry from Tennessee, who is now being seconded to Dion Lewis, who may be a good fit for that team because he's an absolute cannonball. That will be a guy I'm targeting. That's the sort of mentality Howie Roseman's going to have. It's value versus production, and I think Bell and McCoy both offer production, but in terms of value and what you get around with them and the circus that comes, well, you're not getting a lot of it in reciprocation. Well, this show's actually gone on a little bit longer than I first intended. I always shoot when it's on my own to go around half an hour, because I feel like anything more than half an hour, you're probably going to get a bit bored of a whiny British voice, right? But before I do call it a day, just a couple of things, really. I think, one, I wanted to go in depth a little bit on one player who's not getting enough love. And I'm not going to go into deep in stats and why and justification. I'll just give you the cold, hard stats and we'll leave it there. There was once a tight end that went by the name of Tony Gonzalez. Okay. Now, Tony Gonzalez, as we all know, is arguably one of the most dominant receiving tight ends in football. It was the first receiving tight end that I was aware of when I first discovered the sport, and someone that has really shaped the mould for the modern day prototype. So, hypothetically, I mean, how would Zach Ertz and Tony Gonzalez fare? Like, if you were to compare their first 81 career games, as Joe Giglio did on Twitter earlier today, side by side, how would they look? Well, Tony Gonzalez has 342 catches for 4,079 yards. Zach Ertz has 369 catches for 4,144. Not only that, but the most catches by tight ends after 6 games of a regular season, Tony Gonzalez had 43 in 2012, Antonio Gates in 2007, Eric Johnson had 45, Zach Ertz had 48 in 2018. Ertz is becoming one of the most dynamic playmakers in the NFL, and he does not get the love he deserves. It's always, but he's not big like Gronkowski. But he's not Travis Kelce. No, he's not Travis Kelce. But do you know what? If we look at I know he's got a game in hand essentially, but let's take a look at receiving yards per game. He's 1.4 yards behind Travis Kelce, who just happens to have some of the most explosive skill position players around him imaginable. What about receiving yards this season? Well, Ertz is ahead of that one by 73 at the moment. So unless Kelce goes off for like 100 yards, he's averaging 80 a game. Those two are going to be pretty locked. Receiving touchdowns, Kelce has 3, Ertz has 2. Ertz is third in the NFL on that front. But what about longest reception? Well, that one goes into, if you're comparing the two, Zach Ertz kind of doesn't really factor into that just yet, but I'm sure he will at some point. I mean, the point is, when you're comparing this, what he's doing is absolutely crazy. In terms of guys that are regular tight ends and on offenses and are regular receiving and not just going to come out for a gadget play, he's just a monster. He leads the league by 18 receptions in terms of tight ends. He leads the league in receptions per game, in targets per game by 2, and in receiving yards, he's averaging 80 per game this season. The man is on an absolute tear right now. So I just wanted to end on that thought. But before I do say goodbye, I wanted to get a little bit personal. Obviously, right now I'm waiting for I guess, confirmation as to what my future holds. As some of you will know, the NFL comes to London in just a couple of weeks. The Eagles versus the Jaguars. I said Jaguars, oh my God, at Wembley. And obviously I've applied for press passes. I'm still waiting to see if I've got them. I don't know yet. But do you know what? I think I've just hit this moment of clarity. Like, if I get them or I don't get them either way, the fact I'm able to do this every single day, and I've been busting my ass now for 4 years, with the podcast, with the website, with the YouTube channel, working a full-time job at times, which can be 40, 50-hour weeks. And then on top of that, what is essentially a full-time responsibility just to keep up with regular beat writers in terms of volume of content and quality. I'd be up till 4 or 5 in the morning every day, up at 6 for work, and then do it all over again. And it has been the most intense thing I've ever done is running this website, but I love it. And you know, whether I do or don't get them, the fact I've had an opportunity to, it means the world to me. And I'm trying not to get emotional now, so God forbid if I actually get these things. And I'm going to be an emotional mess trying to make a thank you video. But none of this would be possible without you guys. So, you know, we've grown so much this year in terms of the YouTube channel and the podcast and the site. Like, it's all beginning to snowball. And it's all thanks to you. Thank you for taking a chance on a British kid that lives a million miles away, that hasn't been to a game yet. I'm just someone that's trying to outwork everyone else and be the best I can every day. You know, I'm not saying that to be cliche. I'm just possessed at this point. Like, I have to be at the top. Like, I'm so sick of maybe just not getting the respect or feeling that if I break a story, there's no legitimacy to it because of my location. I want to change those perceptions. You know, I want to go out there and just put out the best content I can every single day. And I'm really happy you guys are enjoying that. It honestly delivers me joy. If I didn't put that out there, or if I did put it out and no one enjoyed it, it'd be pointless. So knowing that you guys believe in me and take time out of your days where you have families, you have lives, you've got demanding jobs, life can get really tough at times, and to think that I'm a part of that routine, honestly, it's the most overwhelming feeling ever. So thank you so much just for giving me this opportunity. Sorry to get all emotional on you at the end, but we will be back next week with another episode of The Outside Insider. We're going to have some Eagles filmings coming up over the next few days. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart. If you're new around here, hit subscribe on iTunes. Get this on your phone every single week, and I'll see you next Friday for The Outside Insider.